Hi again. Let's talk about jazz phrasing, jazz inflections, just how to make a jazz sound on the violin. Basically, my main influences, as I've said previously, have been Stephane Grappelli, a couple of other jazz violinists, Sven Asmussen, Stuff Smith, but primarily, and if you go back a generation before those guys, who their influences were, it's mostly horn players. Grappelli just was trying to sound like Louis Armstrong. In fact, everybody wanted to play like Louis Armstrong or Sidney Bechet. There's a handful of sort of seminal horn players and vocalists that violinists have been imitating for all this time. Even though a couple generations removed, we may not realize it anymore. Most of us are in this genre are just trying to sound like Grappelli. Or if you're watching this, maybe you'd like to sound like me. I don't know, but basically you want to sound like a horn player if you're in this position. So here's a couple of tips. First of all, vibrato. If you're classically trained, you probably vibrate all the time. You kind of like turn it on and let it go, and it never stops. Hopefully that's not true for you personally, and I'm not pointing my bow directly at you, but for a lot of us, we're taught that if we're not vibrating every note, we're not trying hard enough, unfortunately. Vibrato is important in jazz. Vibrato has a role to play, but we have to, a little bit like Baroque musicians, we have to know when to use it and when to use it judiciously, when not to use it. If you think about vocalists, if you use the analogy of vocalists here, I think it's very instructive. And it can help you sort of channel the sound you're looking for. Think about an opera singer as analogous to a classical violinist, a classical soloist. You know, there's that kind of raging vibrato that's designed to project the sound to the back of the hall and you know, and make it heard and make a lot of noise. It's full, it's constant, and it starts right at the beginning of the note. In fact, you might even say that we use the vibrato in that context to create emotion or to be expressive, right? That's where, like at the peak of the note, that's when the vibrato is most intense. Now think about a jazz vocalist. If you think about Frank Sinatra, maybe. Frank Sinatra or many pop vocalists, many R&B vocalists for that matter, will create tension by not vibrating and then release the tension with some vibrato. So at the beginning of the note, and maybe through a lot of the duration of a note, there will be nothing. And then they'll tail it off with the vibrato. So that for me is the tension. It's the holding the listener's attention with the lack of vibrato and then releasing. Let's hear it again. In this case, I'm doing something with my bow at the same time. I'm releasing some of the sound. So I'm putting some weight into the sound while I'm not vibrating, and then releasing that and tailing that off at the same time that I start the vibrato. And this is a very long, slow example, but this can happen in a very short period of time as well. So, right there, none, some, and it was the same shape of a note. It was sustained and then released. So that's vibrato. You may have noticed that